Hi, my name is Cindy Morales, and I am the Executive Director of Pro-Life Champions. I am really excited to be able to share with you our latest film, Shout My Story Special Reports, Incompatible with Life. We made this film because we learned while meeting women during our filming stories for our Shout My Story project that it is not uncommon for doctors to recommend women to abort their sick children. This was a phenomenon that I had not been aware of, even though the first time I heard of this happening was actually several years ago while I was a professor at a nearby Catholic university teaching theology. I received a paper that was less an essay than a confession, and it started out something like this: all I ever wanted was to be a mom. And after several miscarriages, my dream was finally going to become true. Until one day, I received a terrible call from my doctor telling me that there was something wrong with my baby. And after much prayer and consultation with my pastor, we decided to let my child go to heaven. The doctor who performed the procedure baptized the baby. And she ended her paper with this: I think about my son every day. Many of my friends and coworkers do not know my story. I fear that they will judge me and not understand. I know in my heart that I did the right thing and that my Lord understands and forgives me. This was the first time I had heard of a doctor telling a woman to abort her child, and I found her story heart-wrenching. The condition that her child had would have caused some disability, but he would have lived to adulthood and beyond. The doctor convinced her that her child would be better off dead. He felt that the quality of life would be poor, and so termination would be best. I have often thought about this student over the years, especially when we began the Shout My Story project and began to meet women who were also told to abort their children because they had a life-limiting diagnosis. I should mention that the Shout My Story project is our way of sharing stories of women who choose life in difficult circumstances, the kind of circumstances that might lead another woman to choose abortion. These films are short, around 5 to 7 minutes, and we share them on social media. We share them on Facebook, on Instagram, on our YouTube channel, and on our website. You can watch them either going to our website, shoutmystory.org, or just going to YouTube and typing in Shout My Story. One of the first stories we filmed was the story of Mary Grace, which we have retold in this documentary. Mary Grace only lived 30 hours, but during that life, she was loved and cherished. She was cherished by her parents, by her extended family. And those parents, despite being very open and devout Catholics, were encouraged strongly to abort Mary Grace once they received the diagnosis, anencephaly, because she was incompatible with life. After we released the story of Mary Grace, we heard from other women who had been similarly pressured, and we realized that this is a big problem. Aborting sick children is simply a form of euthanasia. Indeed, the reasons given to justify these abortions are the same reasons given to end the life of any sick person. The doctors that convinced my student to abort did so by convincing her that her child would have poor quality of life. Mary Grace's parents, and many of the parents that I interviewed for this film, were told their child was incompatible with life. There were some parents that I interviewed that told stories of doctors who told them of their child's life-limiting diagnosis and followed up with, "And I've scheduled your termination for Tuesday," even without asking the parents if that's what they wanted. I don't know about you, but I was very shocked by the realization that doctors are so enthusiastically recommending abortion. I wondered how we could get from the Hippocratic Oath, which specifically forbids abortion and euthanasia, to this new mentality. When doctors talk about quality of life or tell their expected mothers their babies are incompatible with life, they are not giving a medical diagnosis. These are subjective and ableist terms. So, if they aren't medical, where do they come from? I believe that they come from a very jaded philosophy called eugenics. Eugenics, as you probably know, was an extremely popular philosophy in the late 18th and early 19th century. The late 19th and early 20th century in both the United States and Europe. Eugenicists pretend that their ideas are grounded in science because since the Age of Enlightenment, science, instead of religion, is supposed to be the guiding force of society. And eugenics was embraced enthusiastically by the elite. The basic premise of eugenics is that there is some ideal of human perfection. And if one does not meet that ideal, one can be removed from society. Among eugenicists, of course, there was a bias against the poor, against what they called the feeble-minded, which was pretty much anybody poor, blacks, and in Nazi Germany, of course, Jews. And I should point out that that basic premise of eugenics, it's not science at all. It is, like I said before, a jaded philosophy. Now, in the United States, in the early 20th century, thousands of poor, mostly black, but also poor white women were sterilized in the name of eugenics. There's a very famous Supreme Court case in which one of the Supreme Court justices that signed off on the sterilization of a perfectly healthy young woman said 3 generations of feeble-minded idiots is enough. Now, these people weren't really feeble-minded. They were just poor, but that was the mentality that was guiding many of the elite in the 20th century in the United States. Another example, Margaret Sanger, founder of Planned Parenthood, was an enthusiastic eugenicist who wanted to use birth control to diminish the black population. Very specifically, she said so, and poor people in general. Many times the elite of the 20th century thought that the poor were poor because there was something wrong with them genetically so that they could breed humans like animals and, improve the stock. Of course, this popular theory also was found in Germany. I have read that Hitler was actually influenced by the American and English eugenicists. And Germany, being the efficient people they are, took it one step further, and they were the first country that I'm aware of to legalize the actual killing of disabled individuals. In a program that they called Action T4, those who were declared Lebensunwertes Leben, life unworthy of life, were killed. Over 200,000 disabled Germans were killed between 1938 and 1945. And they were killed by doctors and nurses using science, the science of eugenics, as a justification. One of the people in the film that you're going to meet, Brad Smith, made the comment, which isn't in the film, that the Nazis never left. They're still around. They're still wearing white coats, and they're still making decisions like this. But today, doctors do not speak in such stark terms of eugenics. Instead, they phrase their ideology using false mercy instead. Many parents that I spoke to were told by their doctors that their children, if they weren't going to die immediately, would have a poor quality of life and their families would suffer too. They were told to think of their other children, of their finances, of the stress a disabled child would bring to their family. They were often told their children were incompatible with life, although in a very few cases were their children going to die right after birth, unless they were neglected to death, which the doctors and hospitals often tried to do, unless the parents advocated very hard for their child. The parents I interviewed did have to fight quite often the hospital and ethics committee to make sure that their children received the medical care that they needed. And because they are fighters, their children are alive today. For example, in the film, you will meet Faith Smith, the child of Brad and Jessie Smith. Faith is now 12, but she was 10 and a half when we filmed her. She has trisomy 18. And when she was born, she was very sick with breathing problems, which is common among trisomy 18 kids. The hospitals weren't helping her, but the Smiths found Dr. Green, who is also in the film, and he performed a surgery on Faith which greatly improved her breathing, and she began to grow. And so now she can even walk with a walker. The Smiths are tireless advocates, not only for Faith, but for other children with trisomy 18. Because what they have learned and what they hope to share in the film is that when treatments are made available, more children with trisomy 18 survive. So what do we hope this film will accomplish? All the parents that I interviewed for the film wanted to give a message to doctors and to parents facing the devastating diagnosis of a life-limiting condition of their children. They want them to know that their children, no matter how brief their time is on earth, are loved. They have a purpose. They are part of a family. They are not solely defined by their diagnosis. They especially want to send the message that all children, even in the case of a severe life-limiting diagnosis like anencephaly, all children have a right to be born. They plead with doctors to look beyond the diagnosis, to offer resources other than abortion to their patients. They want to offer hope, because it is often a lack of hope that leads these women to choose abortion. I often think of my student who was given no hope, no resources. She was given the bleakest possible scenario for her child's diagnosis, which, by the way, I don't want to share with you the diagnosis because of her privacy, but I can tell you that what the doctor told her was not true. That her child would not have been the terrible burden on society. That's the picture he painted. He would not. He would have had maybe a learning disability. It's just too much. I can't believe it. So these parents, they are angry that their children are dismissed, and they want to send this message of hope, this message to doctors and to parents who are facing this diagnosis, that there is hope and there are resources, and so you can choose something other than abortion for your child. You can choose life. So that is what they want to do, and that is what we hope the film will accomplish. The great thing about gathering as an international pro-life community is that we can come together and share ideas to develop resources in areas that do not yet exist. So, if you don't have a place like Gigi's Playhouse in your country or in your town, then you're going to hear about Gigi's Playhouse in the film. Then maybe I can get you in touch with Nancy Gianni, the founder of Gigi's Playhouse, and she can share with you ways to develop one. If you don't have perinatal hospice, then perhaps your pro-life groups in your town and in your country can begin to advocate for perinatal hospice. It is my hope that this film is a starting point to develop and share resources and advocacy for those facing a life-limiting diagnosis of their child before and after birth. You have my permission to share this film far and wide. Please contact me for more information. And I hope that someday we will meet in person. I was looking forward to coming to Croatia this year, but it is not to be. Perhaps another year. Meanwhile, may God continue to bless and enrich you all in your pro-life efforts in your countries. May God bless you and keep you. Thanks for listening.